Teachers at British schools are said to be reporting cases of possible radicalisation among students more often than ever before. It comes amid widespread criticism of a government initiative in the UK called Prevent, which is aimed at combating radicalisation. Well, to discuss this matter further, I'm happy to say we can cross live to Tony Bugle. Tony's the founder of Mothers Against Radical Islam and Sharia, and Tala Ahmed from the Muslim Council of Britain. You're both very welcome to the programme. Ahmed, can we start with you? Over 1,000 cases of child radicalisation have been reported in the UK in less than 3 years. Do you believe that the figures for children are that high?
Well, I think the figures, given that it's done over the period of 3 years and given the concerns around ISIS, I don't think the figures themselves are particularly high. Also, what is not clear from the figures is exactly what sort of concerns were raised about each one of these people. I think what is important to assert is this: radicalization and extremism is a real problem and a threat to our society. They need to be addressed and they need to be dealt with. Of course, how we deal with them, and especially when it involves children and schools and teachers, how exactly we deal with them and what protections and safeguards are there to make sure the referrals are appropriate is very, very important.
Tony, I suppose it's a fine line, isn't it, between having a religious upbringing and actual radical ideas. Who will judge that, and how can the authorities even go about determining that this is really the case for children?
Well, first of all, I think that the numbers actually, they're probably a lot higher, because we have to ask ourselves how many are not being reported. I think if these concerns are being brought forward by teachers, then it's a real concern and one that we have to take very seriously, because as far as I'm concerned, this a few years ago, 2014, for example, there was the same thing, Trojan horse, that was happening in Birmingham, of which our fellow guest here claimed it was a witch hunt. I don't think it was a witch hunt. I think it was a genuine concern. It's something that should have been addressed then, and it's something that needs to be addressed now, because essentially it's child abuse. There's no other way of looking at it. If you take a child and you teach a child that much hatred, that to me is an awful thing to be teaching any child.
Well, I'm surprised that and glad that he brought the issue of Trojan horse, because I also happen to be the lawyer acting for in one of those cases, and my honourable guest would be pleased to know that if he follows the issues around Trojan horse and the case ultimately advanced by the government against some of those who were forced out of their respective positions from these schools, that whole Trojan horse found, first of all, it found no evidence of radicalization. Secondly, the whole issue, I mean, if you take the leading figure in Trojan horse, he was accused of undermining fundamental British values and all sorts of other things. Ultimately, these are allegations which were withdrawn and in fact were not advanced by the government itself. And so what it demonstrates is that some of us, rightly concerned about the integrity of our country, rightly concerned about the security of our people, and rightly concerned about the issue of radicalization and terrorism, get carried away by their perceived view of Muslims and Islams in this country. I think what we need to recognize is that
that's such a ridiculous thing to say. I really get tired of this whole...
Well, you obviously don't know much about the Trojan horse, I'm afraid. That's why.
Hang on. I have looked into the Trojan horse, actually. I've looked into it. I also know they have posters up that said if they didn't pray 5 times a day, they'd burn in hell. I think that is very extreme. I think it's a very extreme thing for any child to be told. But more importantly is the fact that there were posters up that said that. Had they have addressed this and actually focused on the fact that these children were at risk of being radicalised in 2014, then we wouldn't have to be looking at it happening yet again now in 2017. Now, I'm not saying that you are an extreme person.
How ridiculous.
But you will always come out with a continuous... If you let me finish, I said I wouldn't say you are an extreme person. I would not say that, okay? That is what I said.
Okay.
Also, what I would say is what you do is you come out with this rhetoric of that this is some kind of witch hunt, that this is hatred towards Muslims, that Muslims are somehow disenfranchised, marginalised, the usual rhetoric. The problem you've got is these things are happening, and when anybody says anything about it, the first thing we're told is that we're Islamophobic. It's not because we've got any genuine fears, is it?
Well, let me deal with 2 points. First of all, the issues around prevent and how it is applied. The concerns are well known, and they are not just concerns raised by Muslim community. Every major teaching union raised concerns. Many respectable academicians raised concerns. Even government's own reviewer of the terrorism legislations, the current and the previous one, they have also raised concerns. Dealing with the issue of Trojan horse, I mean, you've spoken as if in those schools there are posters everywhere sanctioned by the school authorities which frightened young people about hell and so on, and yet the reality is, the truth is far from that. There was one incident of a poster that somebody did put out. The head teacher immediately dealt with it.
Shouldn't have been
and the
any
matter was resolved.
Shouldn't have happened at all.
Well,
Okay, let's just go away from Trojan horse for a minute, Ahmad. Ahmad, I want to bring in a situation. In a Belgian kindergarten recently, teachers there said that they were concerned by some of the youngsters' behaviour. Do you believe that children as young as 3 and 4 can be affected? And what should be done if this is the case, that teachers are actually saying that we are seeing this happen on a daily basis, that they are getting radicalised? What's the solution?
Listen, I used to be a teacher previously, and I know that sometimes children will behave in all sorts of ways. The approach we take is 2 things we need to bear in mind. First and foremost, if children clearly shows evidence of them being distressed or vulnerable to abuse, that needs to be dealt with utmost importance and seriousness. But at the same time, we also need to recognize that the fight against radicalization and terrorism is a fight of all of ours, Muslims, non-Muslims, all alike. And therefore, we have to be extremely careful that we do not create a condition and a narrative in which all Muslims are seen as suspect. Sometimes that is what happens. Now, what you will also see is that we have to draw a clear line between what we may perceive to be a conservative religious practice and what happens to be extremism. There is no link to show that a devout Muslim suddenly becomes a terrorist or vice versa.
Tony, could this initiative prevent actually create more animosity if Muslim communities feel that they're being singled out, especially the young? How would you get around that?
Look, right now, to be honest with you, my concern, the only victims that I have seen and victimisation are people such as the children at the Ariana Grande concert. And I'm sorry if it offends people, that we need to take this very seriously. It needs to be dealt with. And I would ask Tahel, why is it that your community isn't doing more? It's always, whenever anybody who's non-Muslim, you have to understand, if I say that we need to address this, I'm accused of Islamophobia. If I say we need to address this, I'm accused of blaming all Muslims, and I don't think that it's all Muslims. So why is the Muslim community not doing more to challenge this? Why is it they're not cleaning up their own backyard, and yet the minute we say anything, we're accused of being far right? Why is it that Prevent seem to be more concerned with dealing with anyone who's got a right-leaning political opinion than they are with dealing with the Islamic extremism? There is a connection. It's not my fault that these people see themselves as being Muslim and will do this in the name of Islam. I'm not asking them to do it, and I'm certainly not asking for any child to be taught any kind of extreme views, homophobic views, to have views that, in my opinion, go against everything that this country stands for. I don't want those children taught that. And for me, when children are taught this, and it is happening, even in this report, as you've seen in the newspaper that we read, it states teachers are teaching this to their classes.
OK, Ahmad, we've got 30 seconds for this last question for both of you. Ahmad, if you can start. Stats are showing that the number of referrals to radicalisation watchdogs has spiked dramatically since the Manchester, London attacks. Is this just hysteria? Are they right to report them? Just 30 seconds each, please.
Well, I think where there is concern, they ought to report, but there are also significant concerns about what different people in different parts of the country perceive to be extremism and extremists. So we have to be very careful that we do not conflate between our perception of a community as opposed to the reality. And the point is this: Muslim community is doing whatever it can and should do, but we as a community has no greater responsibility than any other section of the society.
Yes,
I say it again, it is a fight of all of ours, and we all have to fight and take this monstrous ideology and initiative head on.
Well, first of all, extreme is extreme is extreme. You can dress it up any way you want. But actually, there is more onus on the Muslim community to address this issue, because anybody who's not Muslim, the minute they say anything, they are shouted down, they are accused of hatred. So actually, it does have to start with the Muslim community. They are not doing enough. They do need to do more. It really is that simple. And I say we need to stop being careful. You say we need to be careful. I say let's stop being careful and let's actually address this problem properly and tackle it head on without fear, because that's what stops political correctness, and fear is what stops us from actually addressing this problem. And that is that's my opinion on it.
Ahmad, you've got 30 seconds to respond to that if you like.
Well, look, Muslim community, first of all, none of the known terrorists that we know of, there is no evidence that Muslim community ever tolerated those views. The mosque do not tolerate it. The community does not tolerate any of the views.
The mosque do tolerate it, that's a lie.
Muslim community has been very vocal and very forthright when it came to challenging the issue of extremism.
Muslims.
No, by and large, I mean, you could apply the same argument about the far-right fascist and the growing Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hatred.
Here it goes.
But the point is, I'm not going to blame. No, there is no. Well, again, I would say that. Well, as I
don't blame an entire
said,
community. But straight away, the far-right narrative had to get thrown in there, because I knew it. You can't help. But the minute that somebody says anything, out comes the far-right narrative. Out comes the fascist ideology. This is not.
Well, because they are dangerous. I mean, just
condemn it completely. Condemn it completely.
But today,
and
look, in Germany today, there were reports.
The first to stand up, but that was one incident compared to how many Islamic terror incidents. So why is your community not actually addressing that issue and shouting down anybody else who has an opinion?
You obviously don't know.
Straight away, you want to say the far-right narrative.
You are obviously not sufficiently knowledgeable about the community and what it does. I would invite you, my friend, go and reach out. Go to the mosque and engage with the wider Muslim community, and you will see the work that Muslim community is doing.
Okay, we thank you both for a spirited debate. Tony Bugle, founder of Mothers Against Radical Islam and Sharia, and Tala Ahmad, I was calling you by your surname, I do apologise for that, from the Muslim Council of Britain. We appreciate both your time this hour.